Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. We have a lot to talk about as there's been a lot going on in the political world lately. We've seen a lot of chaos, a lot of lawlessness within this new administration just over the last few days. I'm a little late on some coverage here, but I do want to say first off that I think everything is still worth talking about, regardless of if you've heard some things have been blocked in the federal courts or have been rescinded by the White House. Everything that has been attempted in the last few days that we're going to discuss today still speaks heavily to the intentions of this administration and the vision that they have for America. So there's nothing that's not worth talking about, and we're going to jump right into it here. So the first thing I want to discuss is a lot of the terminations that you've seen within the government, whether you're talking about firing or terminating entire agencies altogether. And these are some very beneficial ones. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. This is a very important agency they fight for the working people, right? So they're watching out for unions. They're watching out, making sure that CEOs are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that people are being paid a living wage, the proper way, that people are getting paid what they're supposed to get paid. And this isn't just limited to federal jobs. You've seen a lot of progress over the last 4 years in the Biden administration with the NLRB, a lot of pro-union actions. This has been very successful for Amazon workers, Starbucks workers. You had a union just form for Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon recently. And what happened just recently is that Trump fired the head of the board, I believe Gwen Wilcox, and then he also terminated a Jennifer Abruzzo. And these ladies, they were just recently appointed by Biden. They were supposed to serve until I believe it's August of 2028. And to fire them is actually not something that technically a president has a power to do. This is something that would have to go through Congress. You would have to be presenting reasons and not just disagreement of opinion. You would have to talk about things such as fraud or negligence, serious offenses that would warrant these firings, not differences of opinions, which is why they were appointed to serve essentially another 4 years from now, more than that really, but they've been terminated now. So this is a huge hit to the working class. It's not really just as simple as firing them and then moving on. Because that they've been fired, the NLRB is inactive right now. They don't have a board chair to make decisions, to hold meetings and things of that nature, so they can't do anything at this moment. This is something that will certainly go through the courts. It will make its way likely to the Supreme Court eventually, and the case that Trump will likely make, Elon and Jeff Bezos have both advocated that the NLRB is somehow unconstitutional and shouldn't exist in the first place. So, with these being some of Trump's closest allies, the expectation is that when he takes this to the Supreme Court, that his case will not just be regarding the firing of these women, but to terminate the whole agency altogether, which would be, just terrifying for, especially when you talk about unions in particular. It would essentially destroy any hope that they have of fighting back against CEOs and any company that doesn't want to have a union, which would be most companies that need them. They just wouldn't have a fighting chance at that point. So definitely something to keep an eye on. The other terminations that you saw recently were that Trump fired a dozen or so inspector generals for the federal government. This is very similar, where these are also watchdogs, if you will, but they're looking out for the government specifically, which would be a lot of the people that Trump has appointed into his new administration. And what they're looking for is fraud, waste, abuse, these kind of things. So this goes hand in hand, I think, with an executive order that Trump passed recently. This was more just a few days ago. I think it happened over the weekend, but he essentially passed an executive order to not just legalize, but also normalize corruption in the government. So when you talk about accepting bribes, lobbying for corporations, which is, if you haven't heard that term before, is it's essentially legal bribery. So lobbying is where you have a company, for let's say Big Pharma, because that's probably the best example. They'll take a politician, Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema would be good examples of this, and you'll have them pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars for their campaigns. A lot of these funds would really just end up going directly in the pockets of these politicians, and they'll say, I'll give you these few $100,000, and when you're in power, don't you dare pass any laws that might be to the effect of lowering drug prices or bringing health care to more people, because that would cut into the profits of big pharma. So that's always been a huge issue in politics, Democrat or Republican. The two examples that I just gave you are both Democrats. They don't act like it in the terms of context, but that's what they label as, at least in the last 4 years. They'll be getting out of politics soon, but that's beside the point. They did a lot of destruction. They were the main reason that the Build Back Better bill didn't pass under Biden, and that hurt a lot of people because it could have been such a tremendous bill in terms of healthcare in particular, but that speaks to the lobbying point. They are bought by Big Pharma, and they wouldn't act against their interests, so they caused that bill to fail. What Trump has done is now said that's legal, great, and fantastic, because he understands that he himself and a lot of the people that he'll be appointing into his administration, that's what they're all about. And he doesn't want them to feel uncomfortable taking money from these companies and even other countries. When you talk about national security risks and things like that, that'll just be normal under this administration. So that is corruption. It is legalizing corruption. That's just the long explanation for it, but that is what it is. So that should scare you as well. And again, I think it speaks to the intentions here. They want to normalize these things that just shouldn't be. And a lot of what I just described to you, back to the context of terminating the inspector generals and the board chairs of the NLRB, are just illegal. He doesn't have the power to do that, especially with the inspector generals in particular. There's a process for that. If you want to have them terminated, you have to present a reason to Congress. Again, not just a difference of opinion, but a feasible reason, like abuses of power, things of that nature. And then it takes 30 days. There's a 30-day notice that you have to give. It has to move through this process because that's what's legal. And all of that was skipped here. Obviously, it hasn't even been 30 days yet that Trump has been president. But he's trying to fast track this. And again, the point is to have it go through the courts, because if he can take this to the Supreme Court and then they rule in his favor, which unfortunately, whether it's legal or not, we saw what happened with presidential immunity. Because of that in particular, the odds are, unfortunately, that they will rule in his favor, and then what you'll likely see is these entire agencies just being wiped out from the government in its entirety. And then you'll really have no guardrails. We already had very few in this administration, but it will essentially be like, not to be dramatic, but it will be like having an emperor where whatever he wants to do will simply be what it is. There will be nobody to say, no, that's not legal, say, no, maybe we don't move forward with this because it's dangerous. It just won't exist. They will do whatever they want to do. So that is a big conversation that needs to be had. Sticking on the same theme of just illegal action and things of that nature, we talked about last week, over the weekend, him shutting down a lot of agencies in terms of research, health research in particular. We talked about cancer research and Alzheimer's research. And what's happened since then is just a freeze on federal funding, and what that affected in a large part was health agencies. And one thing that a lot of people have noticed lately is that egg prices have increased dramatically, I think by $2 or so over the last 2 weeks. So there's a reason for that, and the reason is actually bird flu, avian flu, whatever you want to call it. And that is obviously not something that we have direct control over, but the reason should be shared publicly for a lot of reasons, not just because of the economic impact, but also the health risk. You're starting to see, just as of recently, these cases actually transfer to humans, whereas for the longest time it was just animal to animal, so people didn't have a lot of reason to be concerned. But that's not really being talked about for a reason. What Trump has done is silence these agencies and say, not only are you able to communicate internally about these things because he's just shut them down, but you're also not able to share this information with the public. So you no longer have the FDA and the CDC operating to a degree where they can say, hey, you guys need to be careful because this flu is spreading from human to human, and though it hasn't become rampant yet, that is largely because of information. If you want these things to stay under control and you don't want things to get worse, then the idea would be you do inform the public and you let them know so that they can be more cautious and make informed decisions. That's not being done. They've specifically instructed them not to do that, and you have to ask the question, well, why? Why would we not want these agencies to talk about it? And it really has to do with saving face and saving ego on Trump's part, where he made a lot of promises. You said, oh, you'll see egg prices, those prices will go down day one. They're going to shoot down, and they've done the opposite. So he doesn't want you to know why that is. He doesn't want you to understand that it's because there's a serious emergency. He just wants you to not pay attention. And I find that laughable. I mean, people that are going to go to the grocery store, regardless of what side of the aisle that they're on, and if you voted for Trump, you're going to be disappointed, and if you didn't vote for Trump, it's going to be one of those "I told you so" moments that we talked about before. So that's something that I want people to keep in mind. Fortunately, we have seen some progress over this, where a lot of this is being blocked in courts because, as we talked about, it's illegal. So a lot of this isn't going to stick. Some of what we've talked about is ongoing. Some of what we've talked about is been stopped already, which is great, but it's still not good, because once these things get to the higher courts, I mean, if they are in fact struck down, then everything that we just talked about just goes right back into place. So it's not a take a breather moment and just move on. It's a, oh my God, what are we doing, and how can we really advocate for change moment. That's what it needs to be anyway. So a lot of legal action. Again, a lot of it is a moot point because of the presidential immunity thing that happened with the Supreme Court, and that's something that you need to keep in mind with a lot of this information. Presidential immunity is just a blanket statement that we've never had. It sets a crazy precedent where a lot of these things, despite us knowing that they're illegal, he can go ahead and do them. And there may be consequences in terms of blocking them, but he will suffer no legal consequences. Impeachment is unfortunately unlikely, even if you just consider it because of the majority right now and how fanatic the Republican base is, to the point where even if they know some things are illegal and an impeachment vote is held, they won't impeach him. They will keep him right where he is until it goes through the higher courts, and it may be a losing battle at the end of the day. So all of that is important, but what I find really crazy is that all of this is going on while you've watched Trump build one of the most unqualified administrations in the history of this country. You're seeing a lot of people be put in place for agencies that hate the agencies, like when you talk about healthcare, Dr. Mehmet Oz, being appointed to oversee things like Medicare and Medicaid. This is a man that doesn't even think that those agencies that exist. So it should exist, I should say. So you're putting them in place to essentially not do the job, to either slash the programs or sit there in the position of power and make sure that they're paralyzed in a way where they can't serve the people in the way that they need to. You saw evidence of that recently, where Trump's federal freeze did in fact cut off Medicaid and Medicare, even if only temporarily, and he passed an executive order to raise drug prices. So look at the intentions. He's doing this and staffing the administration with people who are TV personalities, a lot of Fox hosts and right-wing media hosts in general, who really have no political experience, but what they've done is over the last 4 years, they've defended Trump fanatically no matter what he's done or how illegal it may or may not be. They just go to bat for him. They're very loyal to him, and this is their guy. So these are the people that he's surrounded himself with in the administration, not people that have the experience to get the job done, not people that have fought for the working class in the past and have proven that they can bring positive change. He's just surrounding himself with people that he knows are going to do what he wants. This has never happened before in the history of any presidency, but they're actually implementing loyalty tests in all the hiring for people that they're bringing into the administration, even if they're just federal employees. they're going through these people's social media, seeing what have you posted about in the past? Have you always been pro-Trump? Have you advocated for him? Did you ever post anything that might have advocated for the left or Democrats? And if so, you're not welcome in the White House. You're not going to be part of this administration. They're having people send in letters, if you will, that have to have like a MAGA revelation moment where they want to hear about the exact moment where you looked inward and you said, you know what, Trump is right about everything. I'm MAGA all the way, MAGA 2024, and it's, die hard for Trump no matter what happens. So this is why we talk about the cult mindset, because this isn't normal. These are things that are dangerous. In every political administration, you are always going to have Republicans and Democrats, because you don't clean house as soon as you get in there of everybody who was rightfully appointed. This is a man who's all about destroying DEI because he thinks diversity, equity, and inclusion is a way to bypass qualifications, and he doesn't want people in the White House who aren't qualified. Then what is this? Why are you bringing in all these people who, just because they're loyal to you, they don't have to have any qualifications? It just goes to prove the point. It was never about them not being qualified. It was about the diversity. It was not about wanting people of color, women, people that would disagree with Trump and his administration in power. So they're getting in there and they're cleaning house. I really need you guys to pay attention. I know this was kind of a all over the place video, but if you think about it, all of it is connected. They're trying to do all of these illegal action. It sets a precedent where they'll be able to wipe out the White House of everyone who would stand in their way. There will be no agencies to fight for the working class, and it'll be what Trump says is what goes. It will be like having a king or an emperor if they continue to go down this path and they continue to win all of these legal battles. We can only hope and pray at this moment that they do not, that some of the federal judges and even members on the Supreme Court recognize that this is going too far. And if that doesn't happen, we're in for a very, very long 4 years, and maybe even more than that. So thank you all again for watching this video today. If you enjoy this content, again, I do appreciate a like, a subscribe goes a long way to getting this content out to other people. Thank you for joining me on this beginning journey on my politics journey on YouTube, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.